What kind of woman walks into a bank foreclosure hearing and offers to pay a stranger's debt? The banker laughed. The rancher refused to look up. And Eliza Thornton stood in the doorway of the First Bank of Cedar Hollow with her hands folded and her heart pounding against the whalebone of her corset. The office smelled of wood smoke and ink and something sour that might have been fear. Howard Hoskins sat behind his oak desk with foreclosure papers spread before him like a winning hand of cards. The iron stove in the corner threw heat into the room, but the man standing before the desk seemed frozen solid. Samuel Garrett, 44 years old, owner of 160 acres, 8 miles north of town, debtor to the sum of $612. He held his hat in both hands, crushing the brim without seeming to notice. His shoulders curved inward like a man expecting a blow. He had not looked up since Eliza entered. Another widow wanting to throw money at a lost cause, Hoskins said, leaning back in his chair. The leather creaked beneath his weight. How romantic! Do you even know this man, Mrs. Thornton? I know enough. You've been in Cedar Hollow 6 months. You rent rooms above Brennan's Mercantile. You pay $3.50 a week. Hoskins smiled the way men smile when they think they understand everything. Forgive me, but you don't strike me as someone with $600 to spare.
Eliza did not answer. She was watching Samuel, waiting for him to lift his head. He didn't. Sign the papers, Garrett, Hoskins said. Let's not drag this out. Samuel's hand moved toward the pen. His fingers trembled. 28 days. That was how long she had known this man. 28 days since she first saw him standing at his wife's grave with his shoulders broken and his hat in his hands. 28 days since she decided she would not watch another man disappear. But to understand why she stood in this office, offering what she had no business offering, the story needed to go back further. 28 days, to be precise. The day Eliza first saw Samuel Garrett, she had been in Cedar Hollow for 5 months and 3 weeks. She kept to herself. She wore plain dresses. She paid her rent on time and spoke to no one about the $12,400 sitting in an Eastern bank under her name. Her husband Thomas had left her that money when he walked into Boston Harbor and never came back. Clarence Webb was the only person in Wyoming who knew the truth. He was 68 years old, retired from banking, and he had known Thomas back when Thomas still believed in himself. Clarence had written to her after the funeral. He had told her about the West, about fresh starts, about a place where no one knew what she had lost. He visited her rooms that afternoon with 2 cups of tea and news she hadn't asked for.
There's a man north of town, Clarence said. Samuel Garrett. Owns 160 acres. Good land. He dug 3 miles of irrigation ditches himself. Built half the valley's water system back when he still had hope. Eliza wrapped her hands around her teacup. The warmth didn't reach her fingers. Why are you telling me this? Because he owes the bank $612. Because Howard Hoskins gave him 30 days. Because the whole town has already written him off. And I remember when this valley would have been dust without him. What happened? Clarence was quiet for a moment. The afternoon light through the window caught the silver in his hair. His wife Margaret died 3 years ago. Fever took her in the night. Samuel stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Let everything slip. One bad winter, a sick herd. And now he's 30 days from losing everything he built.
Eliza set down her cup. The china clanked against the saucer. And what do you expect me to do about it? Nothing, Clarence said. I'm just an old man telling stories. He rose to leave, then stopped at the door. But I'll say this. A man's worth isn't measured by what he owes, but by what he's built and who remembers. Samuel Garrett built half this valley. Now nobody remembers. Seems a shame is all. He left her alone with the tea going cold and the afternoon shadows stretching long across the floor. She saw Samuel for the first time the next morning. Brennan's general store smelled of molasses and leather and the particular mustiness of grain stored too long. Eliza was examining bolts of wool when the door opened and a man walked in with his hat pulled low and his shoulders hunched against a wind that wasn't blowing.
He approached the counter where Brennan stood polishing the brass scale. 40 pounds of feed, he said. His voice was rough with disuse. I'll pay you back, end of the month. Brennan didn't look up from his polishing. You already owe me $14 from last month, Samuel. I can't carry you anymore. I just need -EOL. I can't. Brennan's voice wasn't cruel. Just tired. Just finished. I'm sorry. Samuel stood there for a long moment. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked out. He didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't do anything at all except accept it.
Eliza watched through the window as he untied his horse from the hitching post. She expected him to ride north, back toward his failing ranch. Instead, he turned east, toward the cemetery. She told herself she wouldn't follow. She followed anyway.
The Cedar Hollow Cemetery sat on a small rise behind the Methodist church. Wooden crosses marked most of the graves. Only a few had proper stones. Samuel stopped at a wooden marker near the back, faded letters barely visible on the weathered plank. He stood there for 20 minutes. Didn't speak. Didn't kneel. Just stood with his hat in his hands and his head bowed and his whole body curved like a question mark that would never find its answer.
Eliza watched from behind the church, her hand pressed against the cold clapboard siding. She knew that posture. She had seen it in Thomas during those last weeks. The way a man stands when he has stopped believing he deserves to exist. Thomas had walked into the harbor on a Tuesday morning. The fishing boats found him 3 days later. She would not watch this again. Samuel's ranch lay 8 miles north of town on a good road that turned bad after the bridge. Eliza rode out on day 5 while Samuel was in town. She didn't want to ask permission. She wanted to see the truth. The truth was this: the man had built something. Irrigation ditches ran for 3 miles from the creek through the lower pastures. The channels were clean, well graded, the work of seasons rather than weeks. Fencing lined the property edge, 280 posts were placed, the wood still showing pale where rot had been cut away. The barn had been rebuilt, 1,800 board feet of lumber standing where a fire had taken the original structure 2 winters past. 40 acres of improved pasture, 12 acres cleared for planting. A spring house near the main cabin. A well with a hand pump that still worked clean. 3 years of work. 3 years of a man refusing to quit even when his heart had shattered. And all of it about to be sold for $600 in debts. She rode back to town and went straight to the bank. Hoskins was surprised to see her. More surprised when she asked to examine the property records for the Garrett Ranch. You want to buy his debt? Hoskins leaned back, a smile spreading across his face. Ma'am, you'd have better luck investing in clouds. That land will be worth twice as much once the railroad buys it. Let it go to auction. The Wyoming Pacific speculators are offering $1,100. More than fair for distressed property. What's it worth if it's not distressed? The smile flickered. I don't follow. The irrigation, the fencing, the rebuilt barn. What's the property worth if the improvements are completed? Hoskins didn't answer. Eliza turned and left him sitting with his ledgers and his brass cash box and his careful calculations of other people's failures. She found Clarence that evening. I need you to arrange a meeting with Samuel Garrett. I have a proposition. Clarence studied her face for a long moment. His pride is all he has left, Eliza. Whatever you're thinking, he'll refuse. Then I'll have to make him see. See what? What he built. What he's worth. She looked out the window at the darkening sky. What everyone else has forgotten.
Samuel didn't trust her. She arrived at his ranch on day 8 with a proposition and a leather satchel full of figures. He met her in the yard, arms crossed, face closed, the suspicious squint of a man who had stopped believing in good intentions. Mrs. Thornton. He didn't invite her inside. Clarence said you wanted to talk. I want to offer you a partnership. I don't need charity.
Good, I'm not offering any. She pulled papers from her satchel. I'll pay off your $612 of debt. In exchange, I take 40% of profits for 5 years. Not ownership, profits. You keep the land. You do the work. I provide capital. He stared at her. The morning sun was harsh on his face, showing every line that grief had carved there. Why? Because I know what land is worth when it's worked properly. Because I did the math and Howard Hoskins is a fool. She held out the papers. Walk your property with me. Show me what you've built. Then tell me if I'm wrong.
He didn't take the papers, but he didn't send her away either. They walked the land together. 3 hours under the late winter sun, her boots sinking into mud, her skirts dragging through grass that should have been grazed down by cattle he no longer had. She made him name everything. Those irrigation channels, she said. You dug them yourself? 3 miles. His voice was flat. Took me 2 summers. This fencing, how many posts replaced? 280, maybe more. Lost count. The barn. When did you rebuild it? Winter before last. Fire took the original. Lightning strike during a storm. He stopped walking. Looked at the structure like he was seeing it for the first time. 1,800 board feet. Hauled the lumber myself.
Eliza pulled a small notebook from her pocket. Total debt, $612. Land value at foreclosure, $800. That's what Hoskins is counting on. But with the improvements completed, more fencing, spring planting, a few head of cattle, this property is worth $2,200, maybe $2,400 in 18 months. Samuel was staring at her. That's not a failing ranch, Mr. Garrett. That's 3 years of a man refusing to quit. She closed the notebook. The bank sees a debt. I see an investment. The only question is whether you're willing to work with me or whether you'd rather let Hoskins win.
He was quiet for a long time. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of distant snow. Finally he spoke. Give me 2 days to think about it. She gave him 2 days. He said yes on the second one. The work began. Eliza provided $340 in capital, $45 for seed corn, $60 for feed grain, $55 each for 2 heifers, $65 for fencing supplies, $60 for tools and provisions. Samuel worked from before dawn until after dark, his body remembering rhythms his mind had tried to forget. By day 14, the south fence was completed. 140 posts, 6 days of labor, his hands blistered beneath leather gloves. Spring planting was underway, 12 acres of oats, 8 acres of hay. The first calf was born on a cold morning, slick and struggling, and Samuel stayed in the barn until it found its feet.
Eliza came to the ranch every other day. She brought food, biscuits, stew, preserves from her landlady's kitchen. She didn't hover, didn't supervise, just worked alongside him when work needed doing, and sat on the porch when sitting was what he needed more.
On day 15, Hoskins rode out to inspect the bank's collateral. He found them in the north pasture, repairing fence line. Samuel's shirt was dark with sweat. Eliza had tied her skirts up to keep them out of the mud. Neither of them stopped working as Hoskins approached. I see you found yourself a partner. Hoskins dismounted, examining the new fence posts with exaggerated care. I've seen this before, Garrett. She'll sink her money in, you'll fail again, you always do, and she'll have nothing. Then you'll have ruined 2 people instead of just yourself. Samuel's hands stilled on the wire he was stringing. His jaw tightened. Maybe you should quit now, Hoskins continued. Savor from your particular brand of destruction. He rode away before either of them could respond. That night, Samuel didn't come for supper. Eliza found him at Margaret's grave, standing the same way she'd seen him stand that first day. Hat in hands, shoulders curved, the shape of a man disappearing. Maybe he's right, Samuel said without turning around. I ruin everything I touch.
Eliza stood beside him. The wooden cross was rough-hewn, the letters carved by a man who had been too grief-sick to make them straight. Margaret Garrett, beloved wife. Then prove him wrong, Eliza said. Or prove me wrong. But don't prove yourself right about being worthless. That's the only failure that matters.
Samuel was quiet for a long time. The wind was cold, carrying the promise of more frost. Finally, he put his hat back on and turned toward the cabin. He came for supper after all. Day 18 brought the town meeting. The monthly gathering was held in the town hall, a simple building with wooden benches and kerosene chandeliers and maps of railroad expansion tacked to the walls. 43 people crowded into the space, farmers and merchants and the wives who ran things while their husbands pretended to. Hoskins stood at the front, his voice carrying to the back rows. The Wyoming Pacific is expanding their line through this valley. They're interested in acquiring available properties for right-of-way and development. I've been in discussions with their representatives. A murmur ran through the crowd. Railroad money was real money. Railroad attention was a kind of salvation for struggling towns. Properties currently under bank management, Hoskins continued, will be offered first. The Garrett Ranch is among them. The speculators have proposed $1,100 for the 160 acres. Samuel sat in the back row with his hat in his hands. He didn't speak, didn't look up. The back of his neck was red with shame.
Eliza sat 3 rows ahead. She watched Hoskins smile, watched the townspeople nod along, already calculating what railroad money might mean for them, watched Samuel disappear inch by inch into the bench beneath him. She stood. The murmur died. Everyone turned. The Garrett Ranch is not under bank management, Eliza said. Her voice was steady despite the pounding in her chest. Mr. Garrett's debt is being restructured through private investment. The property is not available for sale to railroad speculators or anyone else. Hoskins's smile faded. Mrs. Thornton, I don't think you understand -EOL. I understand perfectly. The railroad wants to buy distressed property at a fraction of its value. But the Garrett Ranch isn't distressed anymore. The improvements are underway. The land will be worth twice what they're offering within 18 months. She looked around the room, meeting eyes that had been carefully avoiding Samuel all evening. This town used to know what that property was worth. Samuel Garrett built 3 miles of irrigation that keeps half your farms watered. Perhaps you should remember that before you let Howard Hoskins sell his legacy to speculators. She sat down.
The silence stretched for a long moment. Then the meeting continued, but the energy had changed. People were looking at Samuel now, not with pity, but with something closer to recognition. Afterward, he caught her outside. The night was cold, stars sharp overhead, their breath-making clouds in the air between them. Why did you do that? His voice was rough. Now everyone knows, if I fail -ol, then we fail together. She pulled her shawl tighter against the wind. I've failed alone before. It's worse. He didn't have an answer for that. Neither did she. The days that followed were different. Samuel watched for her arrival now. He would be working in the yard when she rode up, but his head would lift at the sound of hooves, and something in his shoulders would ease when he saw it was her. They worked side by side. She learned to check fence tension, to read the way cattle moved when they were healthy versus sick, to know which clouds meant rain and which meant nothing at all. He learned that she liked her coffee strong and her conversations sparse, that she laughed at things that weren't funny and went quiet when things were. On day 20, they sat on the porch with cold coffee between them, watching the sun set over the mountains. Your husband, Samuel said. It was the first time he'd asked. Clarence said he passed.
Eliza looked at her hands. His name was Thomas. He was a good man. She paused. He owned a shipping company in Boston. Lost $8,000 in one season when 3 ships went down. Couldn't recover. Couldn't forgive himself. What happened to him? He died thinking he was nothing. Because his business failed, he believed he was worthless. She looked up at the mountains, the snow catching the last of the light. I stood at the harbor where they found him and swore never again. Never watch another man disappear into shame when I could have spoken.
Samuel was quiet for a long time. The coffee cooled between them. "So I'm what?" he finally asked. "Your second chance?"
Eliza turned to look at him. His face was hard to read in the fading light, but his eyes were steady on hers. "No," she said. "You're a man worth saving. The only question is whether you'll let yourself be saved." He didn't answer, but he didn't look away either.
Day 23 brought the frost. Samuel woke before dawn to white fields. He walked the damage in silence, his boots crunching on frozen grass. 7 of 12 acres of oat seedlings destroyed. The hay crop damaged but salvageable. Loss, roughly $180 in expected yield. 2 of the heifers were showing signs of milk fever. If they died, that was another $110 gone. He was standing in the ruined oat field when Hoskins's buggy came up the road. The banker didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I've reviewed your account, Garrett. The original terms allowed 30 days. You've had 23. Given the recent developments, the bank is adjusting the timeline. Payment in full required within 7 days, or the property goes to auction." Samuel felt something collapse inside him. "You can't do that." "I can and I am." Hoskins pulled foreclosure papers from his coat. "Sign now. Save yourself the humiliation of a public auction. Save your investor the embarrassment of backing a losing horse." "He's not signing anything."
They both turned. Eliza was riding up the path, her face flushed from the cold, her eyes hard. "Mrs. Thornton." Hoskins's smile was thin. "I was just explaining to Mr. Garrett-EOL. I heard what you were explaining." She dismounted and walked to stand beside Samuel. "He's not signing. Neither am I. 7 days, Mr. Hoskins. We'll see you then."
Hoskins looked between them. His smile didn't waver. "This woman deserves better than a man who can't hold on to anything, Garrett. You've already taken $340 of her money. How much more will you waste?" He left the papers on the fence post and drove away. Samuel stared at the frozen fields, at the sick cattle, at the papers fluttering in the wind. "I can't do this," he said. "You can. You can." "I can't." His voice cracked. "The math doesn't work. Even with everything we've done, we're $220 short. The hay won't cover it. The cattle can't be sold fast enough. It's over."
Eliza reached out and took the papers from the fence post. She folded them carefully and tucked them into her pocket. "It's not over until you sign," she said. "Don't sign." But she saw the way he looked at the ruined fields, and she knew.
He wrote the letter on day 25. Eliza found it tucked into her door the next morning, the paper crisp with cold, the handwriting careful and clear. "Mrs. Thornton, thank you for everything you've done. I'm sorry it wasn't enough. Please sell the cattle and recover what you can from the supplies. I've left the papers unsigned. Maybe Hoskins will honor the original terms if I'm not here to complicate things. I'm leaving before the auction. You shouldn't have to watch me fail. Yours, Samuel Garrett."
She didn't finish reading. She was already running for her horse. Dawn was just breaking when she reached the ranch. Samuel was in the yard, loading saddlebags onto his horse. One change of clothes. A pocket knife. Nothing else. "You're running." He didn't turn around. "I'm protecting you from wasting more on a lost cause. Look at me." He didn't move. His hands kept working at the saddlebag straps. Eliza pulled papers from her own satchel. Not foreclosure documents. Bank statements. Her bank statements. The full accounting of everything Thomas had left her. My husband left me $12,400, Samuel. He finally turned. His face was blank with confusion. I could have paid your debt the day I arrived. Every penny. I could have handed Hoskins the $612 and been done with it. She walked toward him, the papers held out like an offering. I didn't want to save you. I wanted you to save yourself. I needed you to work for it, to see that your hands built something worth saving. And you did. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard, the exhaustion that had settled into his bones. You just can't see it yet, she said.
Samuel stared at the bank statements. $12,400. More money than he would earn in 20 years. Why? His voice was barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell me?
Because then you would have let me save you, and you would have stayed broken. Just like Thomas. Her voice caught. I didn't want your gratitude. I wanted you to see yourself the way I see you. And how do you see me? Eliza reached up and touched his face. Her fingers were cold against his weathered skin. I see a man who built 3 miles of irrigation ditches, who replaced 280 fence posts, who rebuilt an entire barn with his own hands after lightning took the first one, who worked from dawn until dark for 3 years even when his heart was shattered. She let her hand fall. I see a man worth saving. The question is whether you can see it too.
Samuel didn't move. The dawn light was spreading across the fields, catching the frost on the damaged oats, turning everything gold. I don't know how, he said. Then let me show you.
They rode the property together that morning. All 160 acres, from the irrigation channels to the fence lines to the barn that still smelled of new wood. Eliza made him count it. Every improvement, every hour of labor. Every dollar of value he had created with his own hands. Irrigation, 3 miles. That's worth $200 just in water rates. Fencing, 280 posts replaced. 65 cents per post in labor alone. The barn, 1,800 board feet of lumber, plus 6 weeks of work. Improved pasture, 40 acres. Surviving hay crop, 6 acres, roughly $140 in yield. 2 healthy heifers and 1 calf, $165 current value. She showed him the numbers in her notebook. Property value at foreclosure, $800. That's what Hoskins sees. That's what the railroad speculators see. Distressed land, desperate owner, easy profit. She turned the page. Property value with improvements completed, $2,200 minimum. Probably closer to $2,400 within 18 months.
Samuel stared at the numbers. That's $1,400 of value, created by your hands, in 3 years of work that everyone told you was worthless. He sat down on a fence post, his legs suddenly unsteady. The morning sun was warm on his face, melting the frost from the fields. I built that, he said. It wasn't a question. You built that, and I almost gave it away.
Eliza sat down beside him. Their shoulders touched. Almost doesn't count.
Day 28. The bank, the office, the foreclosure papers on the desk. This time, when Eliza entered, Samuel didn't bow his head. He looked at her, then at Hoskins. Mrs. Thornton claims she wants to restructure your debt, Hoskins said. I've heard this kind of talk before. It usually ends with the bank taking possession anyway.
This isn't talk. Eliza laid papers on the desk. Bank statements, investment contracts, projections with numbers that even Hoskins couldn't argue with. Full payment within 90 days, plus 6% interest. The land remains in Mr. Garrett's name. I hold 40% of profits for 5 years. Hoskins examined the papers. His smile had faded somewhere around the 3rd page. You have the capital for this? I have $12,400 in Eastern banks. I'm offering to invest less than 5% of my holdings in a property that will double in value within 2 years. Eliza's voice was steady. That's not charity, Mr. Hoskins. That's business.
Hoskins looked at Samuel. And you agree to these terms? Samuel straightened, for the first time in 3 years. He stood like a man who had something to stand for. 3 years ago, I let everything fall apart. Let myself believe I wasn't worth saving. This woman saw something I couldn't. He met Hoskins's eyes. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for 90 days to prove her right. You'll get your $612, plus interest, and you'll keep a working ranch in your ledger instead of a speculator's scrip. Hoskins was quiet for a long moment. The iron stove crackled. The oil lamp flickered. He signed the extension. 90 days, full payment required. Interest accrued. Outside the bank, the morning sun was bright and cold. Samuel reached for Eliza's hand. It was the first time he had touched her. You could have told me who you were, he said, what you had. Would you have let me help? He thought about it. About the pride that had nearly killed him. About the shame that had made him pack his saddlebags and write his goodbye. No. Oh, then I told you exactly what you needed to hear. Spring came slowly to the valley. The oats were replanted, 8 acres this time, the second planting taking root in warmer soil. The heifers recovered from the milk fever. A third calf was born, healthy and strong. By day 75, they paid the bank in full, ahead of schedule. Hoskins accepted the payment without comment. But Eliza saw the way he looked at the property assessments. The irrigation running clear, the fences standing straight, the cattle grazing in improved pasture. He saw what Samuel had built, what everyone had forgotten, what she had refused to let disappear. Anna Mercer came to find Eliza in late spring. She was 28 years old. Her husband had died the previous winter, owing $400. She was about to lose their homestead. She had heard stories, the quiet widow and the failing rancher, the investment that saved a legacy. Eliza brought her to Samuel's ranch. They walked the property together, the 3 of them. Hannah was quiet, her eyes moving over the irrigation channels and the fence lines and the barn that still smelled of new wood. I was where you are, Samuel said. Thought I was done. Thought debt meant worthless. He stopped beside the well he had dug with his own hands 5 years ago. The bank seized paper. She saw men who hadn't stopped working even when hope ran out. You're still working, aren't you? Anna nodded. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Every day. Then you're not done yet. Hoskins appeared at the ranch a week later. He came alone, without his buggy, on a horse he clearly wasn't comfortable riding. He stood in the yard with his hat in his hands, looking at the thriving pastures and the healthy cattle and the man and woman working side by side on the porch. I misjudged, he said. Both of you. Samuel set down the harness he was mending. Eliza didn't look up from her ledger. Perhaps some debts are worth honoring differently. Hoskins shifted his weight, uncomfortable in ways that had nothing to do with the horse. Mrs. Thornton, if you're interested in other restructuring opportunities. The bank has a list. Families in difficulty. You might review it.
Eliza looked at Samuel. He looked back at her. Leave the list, she said. Hoskins nodded once, set a folded paper on the fence post, and rode away.
Summer evening. The ranch thriving. Cattle moving slow through improved pasture, their shadows long in the golden light. Samuel and Eliza sat on the porch in matching rocking chairs. One had belonged to his father. The other he had built for her last week. You asked me once, Samuel said, what kind of woman walks into a foreclosure and offers to save a stranger? Eliza looked at him. The sunset caught the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the peace that had finally settled into his face. Did you figure it out? A woman who buried someone who couldn't be saved, who swore never again. He reached for her hand. Who needed to prove that seeing is enough?
Eliza laced her fingers through his. Close. A woman who finally found someone worth staying for.
The land stretched before them, wheat coming up green, cattle moving slow, everything he had built, everything she had seen. The sun set over the mountains. The lamp glowed warm through the cabin window. His hand held hers like something precious and hard-won. Home, worth, together. The end.